says. Okay, so hi everybody.
Hello.
Hello, I'm Lorelei. I am of Third Eye with Lorelei, which is a podcast. I do all things metaphysics and talk about all the woo-woo stuff, which is my favorite thing in the whole entire world. So I made an entire podcast out of it so I can learn about all the things. So today I'm going to be doing a class on divination tools. Now, do you guys know what, just on like a basic level, do you guys know what divination means and like what it is and all that good stuff?
Yeah.
Yes. So for those of you maybe that don't, and that's totally fine. There's no judgment here. Okay, good, perfect. No, that's great. I see you and honor you. I do. So divination is basically, just to boil it down to something very basic, is utilizing tools to communicate with spirit. So what we don't see and what we perceive and feel and how we communicate with them and what we use to communicate with that. And that literally can be anything, truly. So here's an example. So my older sister, I swear on this, uses Pinterest. And I know you guys are like, huh, that's not, no, I swear, it's crazy. So you can have many different modalities and things that you can utilize that you receive communication from. It doesn't have to be the status quo of cards and pendulums and runes and things, okay? So, but it's the attention and the observation of where you're seeing it. And it's like when you recognize something and you say, I wonder if that's what that means. And that's usually a communication from source. And when I say source, I mean God, goddess, anything that is, a higher consciousness other than just what we see and feel and understand. We're all here, yes? Okay. So and I know that the Pinterest thing seems a little bit weird, but let me explain. So she has this board that is all past life stuff. And when she looks it up, she gets images that are very powerful for her. She's like, that was that. That was that lifetime. I did that in that lifetime. Do you see what I mean? It's very direct and very, very meaningful communication. So you can get that from a myriad of different things. It's your attention and your observation that's key here. We understand that? Yes? Okay. So today I'm going to go over the very more popular divination tools that you can use at home. Now, one thing that I like to point out is divination to me is a type of prayer, because praying is communication, right? So utilizing your own tools, so prayer would be your voice, right? You're utilizing your divination tool that's here. So that is another type of divination, is communication. And you get three things from using divination tools, okay? You get connection, you get communication, and you get cognizance. So that is, your understanding and your knowledge from something that's higher than yourself. So those are the things that you're gaining. You're gaining that connection with something outside of yourself. You're gaining the communication, the back and forth of this higher being, or beings, if you will. If you've ever read Ask and It Is Given by Esther and Jerry Hicks, that is an amazing book. And they're accessing an entire consciousness. They call him Abraham, and that's not just one thing. It's like a whole thing. And then there's another one called the Ra contact, like Ra as in the Egyptian god Ra. Are we with me still? Okay. So I get a little tangenty, so please bring Lorelei back in if I start to go there, okay? No judgment. I know my limitations and I know where I get a little crazy, so please feel free. But yeah, the Ra contact is a little bit older, and it's about these people that did essentially the same thing. They contacted and were able to communicate and connect and have cognizance with this whole different consciousness called Ra. So like the Egyptian, they called themselves Ra, and it is bonkers. And you read about it, and they are talking about the law of one, which is the 12 laws of the universe. The first law is your connection. So how we are all connected as a species of humans, how we're connected to our earth, how we're connected to the celestial bodies, and thus also through actual connection in spirit. Okay? So those are the three things, that you have connection, and you have communication, and you have cognizance. Okay? We're good? We're still flowing? We're still good? Yeah? Okay. Excellent. Please let me know if you have any questions too. Like that's totally fine. Like please interrupt me and be like, yo, I don't know what you just said. That was a whole lot of crazy talk. Can you please scale it back in, lady, and like break it down? I'm there. I get it. Okay? All right. So to access these three things, you can utilize tools, and these are the more popular tools that you can utilize. Okay? So I'm going to go over these last because I am extraordinarily biased with these, so I have a lot to say. So I'm going to go over the things that I'm like, I know about and I have utilized and I have researched. Okay? So the first thing, and I absolutely love these because whenever anything is made for me and given to me, it is like literally the best thing ever. I don't know about you guys, but like, it makes my whole entire day better. It's just the best thing. These were made by a lady called, her name's Sarah, and she does readings here, and she makes these out of wood. And okay, so these are runes. Runes. Let me show everybody over here. Runes. Cello. So amazing, right? Yes, it's so amazing. Okay, so what runes are. Now, I did a little bit more research with this because, actually, I'm going to pass these around so you guys can look at them, okay? So runes are a very, very, very old system of writing in Norse and ancient Germanic tribes in Europe. And it's not exactly a language per se. I know that seems a little bit weird because you're just kind of like writing language. Isn't that like the same thing? But like, that was one of the things I was getting, is that it is a writing, so it meant something for people, but it wasn't exactly a language that they utilized in speaking. You see what I mean? Okay, so what those are they are symbols, sort of like Chinese characters. Those are the same type, they're characters. So each thing represents something different. And when you use those in divination practice, which that's another thing, is that in old times, one of the things I was reading is that they didn't really, when I say they, I mean like Vikings and ancient Germanic tribes, and then it kind of spread out from there. People started utilizing it a little bit more when they saw, you know, these super native-y, weird white people using, you know, the runes, right, to understand like, oh, we're going to plant crops here today, and oh, you can go ahead and try and get pregnant now because, you know, this is what the runes are saying. You know what I mean? So like, they didn't really utilize it as like they were thinking it was magical, but like now it's more understood in a modern times that it's used as a magical sort of thing. Like you're communicating with something higher than yourself. Okay? So these all, now I wish I could tell you what every single one of these means, but I genuinely do not know what every single one of these means. I have to Google every single time I do this or look in a book. And it's all very, very interesting and very meaningful. And how you do it is you get stuff out on a table, or you just get a flat table out. And usually you have to have like a cloth with a circle, because you want to cast in the circle. And you go with your hand in the bag, and you do a little thing, and then you pull out some runes, and then you cast it in the circle. And whatever is facing up is your communication. Okay? Usually what I do is as soon as I see what they are, I look it up. Because I haven't memorized runes. I know. Like, I should totally know what they mean, but I totally don't know. It's a lot. So, but it's very, very interesting, and it actually surprisingly quite meaningful. Like, you wouldn't think that a literal roll of the dice, you would get like something very, yes, please.
How many symbols are there?
Okay, so, yeah, I know. So when I was reading about it, there were 24 And it was something Elder Firthark. That's what they're called, I believe, is the symbols of Elder Firthark. And then I think it ranges from like 16 to 24 symbols. I'm guessing that there are 24 in here. So, and each one has their own separate meaning. Okay, so that is runes. Do we have any questions about runes, utilizing them? No. Okay, great. So I'm going to put these babies away. Okay, the next thing is a pendulum. Now, if you have something like this that is very meaningful and wonderful and useful, you can also use a necklace. So something that you wear that's really, important to you, that you have a lot of energy in, you can use that as a pendulum as well. But these are usually really helpful because they kind of have like a point to it, so it kind of makes it easier for you to see what it's doing. Now, I didn't delve into too much of the history with pendulums as much, so forgive me if I don't have like a thing with that, but I do use pendulums, and I've seen it being used before, and they're actually very interesting. So usually how I use pendulums is for yes and no questions. You can, however, have like a sheet or a board that has like yes, no, maybe. You can even go into like astrological symbols and different things and get it really, really super complicated. It's whatever is calling to you. You see what I mean? If you're just kind of like that, I'm going to try these things out, and like you try this out and you're just like, dude, this is my jam. This is the thing. I'm going to use it. So then you can start like delving more into like all the intricacies of it. But the basics of this, just to try it out, is the first thing that you want to do is, whenever you get a new divination tool, you always want to give it an intention. Now the runes, I'm not entirely sure. I kind of feel like you don't have to do it that much. Please correct me if I'm wrong, you out there. If I'm not correct, I am more than happy to correct myself. But I know with a pendulum, you want to charge it with your own energy. Now, as I said with the crystal class, this goes for also divination tools. Your right hand is your giving energy. Your left hand is your receiving energy. Okay? So when you go into the crystal shops and you're looking at all the crystal babies, use your non-dominant hand. So if you're a lefty, you're going to use your right. If you're a righty, you're going to use your left. Okay? So your dominant hand is the giving. So when you're going and picking up stuff, you don't want to give those crystal babies your energy. Not that your energy's bad, it's just you don't want to muddle what the crystal's trying to give off. Especially when you're trying to select it, you want to feel what it's trying to tell you. You want to feel what it has to offer to you. And you want it to feel good in your body. You want to feel something. So, and if you pick it up with your right hand, you're just kind of giving it your energy. Not saying that you can't feel anything, you absolutely can, but it's more meaningful if you take some of whatever it has. Do you understand what I mean? Okay, that being said, when you get something like a pendulum, you want to do the same thing that you do with your crystals when you want to give it an intention. So, you give your intention to your pendulum. I need clear answers. I need clear communication. Please let me know what it is that I need to hear to further my spirituality or whatever it is that you need to know. And what you're going to do with it is you're going to hold it very still, and you're going to say, show me yes. And then it's going to do one of maybe 3 or 4 different things. It'll go clockwise, it'll go counterclockwise, it'll go front and back, or side to side. But either way, when you tell it, show me yes, whatever it shows you, that's yes. Keep making a mental note, write it down, whatever you need to do to remember. That is the yes that the pendulum is telling you. You make it still, and then you say, show me no. And then it'll show you no. Generally, it's either the opposite direction of wherever it was going before. Either way, it'll tell you. Okay? And then you can say, show me rephrase. Okay? Because sometimes you're asking a question, but source is saying, that's not how you should ask that question. Or let's try a different question. You know what I mean? And that can be really frustrating, especially when you're like, I have rephrased this like 8 times. And they're just kind of like, yeah, but you're not asking the right questions here. You know what I mean? So you start to learn, even in your asking process. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's generally how pendulums work, okay? And they're very direct and very clear answers because you're getting yes, no, rephrase, and that's it, usually. Now, again, if you get really into the pendulum work, they're, like I said before, they have like the little things, like the little blankety things or whatever, or tablecloths that have a myriad of different things on it that mean different things. And when you get into it, it can get very, very like deep, and you can get more in detail answers. But just for starting out purposes and like the beginning of using divination tools, this is like a really good yes, no, maybe, and then you springboard off of that. We good? All right. Do we have any questions about the pendulums?
I had a question about the rephrasing part. So are you rephrasing it because it's not giving you an answer?
Actually, it's a really good question. I think maybe the thing here is that if you're wanting to get information from source, and they're like, they always have the answer for you, but it's just the meaning and the communication that they're trying to give you. So if you're asking, like, for instance, you know, I say, like, okay, I want to get a new job. And you ask it, will I get a new job? And it's saying rephrase. Well, maybe your new job isn't necessarily like an actual new job. Maybe it's you getting a promotion. You know what I mean? So the question should be, will I get a promotion? Or will my job status change? Or will I be getting more money? Or whatever it is, you know what I mean? I don't know if that's a great example, but either way, that was the best way I could come up with. But genuinely, it's the communication that's necessary for you at that time. It's sort of like, you know, you can only know so much for your growth. It's sort of like the timing is always perfect when it comes to the universe, and you can't rush these things or mold it. And so if you get too much, which you never ever really will, you know what I mean? But let's just say, for instance, they just gave you too much information. Like, okay, so this day, you know, you're going to get in a car accident. Would you plan up to that day, or would you still live your life until that day comes? You know what I mean? There's a lot of things that comes with asking questions that the universe says, this is what you really need to know right now. And this is what is going to actually help you. So you asking, that's why you need to like rephrase and understand what the question really is that you need answers for. Do you understand what I mean? Mm-hmm. Does that kind of make sense a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you guys have any questions? Yes.
So you said you could use a necklace. What about rosary beads?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Rosary beads. Actually, it's funny. I was thinking about that on my way here, because rosary beads are, in a way, kind of another divination tool. You're using it to pray, and you're counting the beads. Yeah, you can absolutely use it, and there's a nice little point to it, and see if it works.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. How do you use it without the point? The point on the pendulum is very important. So how do you use a necklace without the point? The point is a very important part of the pendulum. So how do you use it without it?
Well, you're still going to get the action, even if the point isn't as prominent. Okay, so if you see like the turn happening or the spin happen, then that's the answer that you're getting. The point just makes it more obvious, because sometimes the subtlety in it can be really challenging to, you know what I mean, even if with a point. So if you're using a necklace and you're not really getting much going on, then maybe try, you know, getting an actual pendulum or finding a necklace that has a point to it. Yeah. So we're talking about points. That's a very good point.
Yeah, it's all sacred geometry when it comes to the pendulum. So how is it swinging if there's no point?
Right, exactly. So I mean, it's easier to see the communication with the point.
Yeah.
So that's why having the point is is important.
Yeah.
But it's not if you.
It's not a necessity.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. It is. It's very, very helpful, but it's sort of like, kind of like when you're talking on the phone and you're getting a bad connection. You can probably still hear what the other person is saying or get what the other person is saying, but it might be a little bit more challenging. You know what I mean? But if you really, yeah.
I think what we're talking about is when we're saying a necklace, we're saying a necklace with a pendant or a ring on there. That, not just a plain chain. I don't know if that's what you were thinking.
Yeah, I was thinking like it can be any shape, like a circle or like a square.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is having a point is important. You can still do it without it, but that connection might be a little bit more challenging. It can still happen though.
Right.
Yeah. So, excellent point.
That's a good thing to know too, that it can still happen without it.
Yes, it can, absolutely, especially if it's something that you really need and you have a good amount of intention into it. Absolutely, you can. All right. Any more questions about the pendulum, my dears? No. Okay. Now we're on to my bread and butter, which is tarot cards. This is what I've been using for years. This is what I use currently, and it is my thing. Okay. So, as far as I know with historically, they're not super old. I mean, I think that from what I was reading, they were utilizing them in like the 1600s as like kind of like playing cards in Italy. And then things sort of, and then they used them as sort of like fortune telling, you know, all that good stuff, and like magic shows and that sort of thing. But it started to become more like meaningful and rounded over time. And in modern day now, I mean, you can find a tarot card deck for practically anything. I mean, truly. So there are two different types of tarot cards. So these are the two that I use predominantly. And actually, that's why there are more, but that's actually, okay, never mind. Sorry, I had to get myself, I had to give myself some advice here in my head, and it kind of went out loud. So sorry about that. Anyway, so there's the traditional Rider-Waite-Rider-Smith deck, which is where you see the major and minor arcanas. Okay, so you see the Lover's card, you see the Strength card, you see the Devil card, you know, all that stuff. That's the major arcana. The minor arcana is reminds me a lot of, actually the whole deck kind of reminds me of an actual card deck, a playing card deck, because there's 52 cards in a playing card deck, and they're with this, it's the same thing. So the minor arcana have cups, pentacles, swords, and wands. And sometimes they can vary, which is fine, because this deck is a little bit different, but it goes along those same lines, okay? And each card has its very specific meaning, and they come with a guidebook, and thank goodness for that. Because you would just look at these cards and be like, well, that's cool. What does that mean, you know? So the guidebook is sort of your way to understand your cards better, okay? And even to this day with this deck in particular, because there's so many little intricacies and things in it, I still use my guidebook, even when I'm doing my readings. Because it's super powerful to look back at the guidebook and see what it's saying. Okay? Eventually, we'll get to the point where you'll get to the point where you know what they're saying. And you know what the communication is. Especially if it's somebody, you know what I mean, that if it's you, or if it's a family member, or if it's a close friend, and you're like, I know what that means actually. And this is what I think it means. This is what's coming to me. So the more you use these, the more you start to get what the communication is. And it feels really good, because you're like, there we go. All right. You know? So, yeah, so this is the bigger deck, the Rider-Waite-Rider-Smith, okay? So, but then there's also the Oracle decks. Now, Oracle decks are just as meaningful as these with communication, but they're just a little bit different. So with these guys, you're not going to get like the suits, but you get, you know, cards, and you have like a word that's associated with the artwork. Okay, so this one is finding, and you have this beautiful woman that is holding her heart, and she has a butterfly over her. So these are very, very meaningful, because there's a lot to it, but it's easily understood. You know what I mean? It's not something that takes, like with these, I have to go back and look in the guidebook and really get an understanding, because they've got like, you know, crystals and bones, and you know, there's like a bat over here, and I'm like, what does this even mean? There's so much happening. But like with these, it's like, oh, that's what that means. It's sort of like a yin and yang. That's why I love these two so much, because they're like a bread and butter, you know, peanut butter and jelly, if you will. Anyway, sorry, tangent again. Let me show the other people did. So oracle decks tend to be a little bit more easily understood. The artwork is really beautiful, and it's intuitively made. So the artist that is, you know, making and selling these decks, they usually they make them all based off of their intuition, what they feel this card means, and you get beautiful communication from oracle decks. I feel like this is a really easy way to delve into tarot cards, because it's a little bit easier to understand what they're saying to you without the guidebook. Now, generally, just use the guidebook. So that way you can glean every piece of information that the card is telling you. But it's easier to get to that point that you're like, I know what that card's saying. You understand what I mean? Okay. Now there's also, and this is my other thing that I love about tarot cards, is that you can use them for so many different things. With these types of cards, you can use them for present situations where you're reading somebody else's energy or your own energy and trying to get communication or clarity about what should be happening with you in your present state. It can bring up past issues in your current lifetime that you need to address in order to move forward. Okay? Generally, you can get future type information, but I feel like the future information is something that's understood. It's not something that you're like, that's gonna happen. You know, so like for instance, when you get the death card, everybody flips out that somebody's gonna die or they're gonna die, but the death card generally means an ending to something and a beginning of another thing. Okay? So like for instance, the job thing, okay? If you get the death card and you're like, oh, and they say, well, this may be an ending of one thing and a beginning of another thing, but you know in your head that you just got an offer on another position and you weren't really knowing if you should take it, but that's what that death card means, is that this is the ending of the old position and the start of the new position. We're here? We're here, yes, okay. So, yeah, that's generally what these cards are brilliant for. They can access a little bit of some future-ish type events, but most of those things are understood. Hence I got this position, I'm not entirely sure if I want it. You understand what I mean? Or like a present situation, you know, or you are holding on to a lot of things that have happened in your past, but you don't know how to let go. But those past situations need to be addressed in order for you to move forward. You good? Okay. There are other types of tarot cards, and this is my other bread and butter and my thing that I love so much. You can use them to access past life stuff. And there's one deck in particular, I haven't yet found another one that's like it, and it specifically goes into past life readings. And it's made by Doreen Virtue and Dr. Brian Weiss. And Dr. Brian Weiss is he's a physician, a psychologist and psychiatrist that's relatively like world renowned. Like he's went to Yale and Columbia for all of his education. And then he like stumbled upon this woman that he really couldn't figure out how to fix. And so he hypnotized her and she regressed herself. And so hence the birth of his past life regression hypnosis. Now, that is kind of like how you really get into past life regression, is by getting regressed. But you can also do tarot card past life as well. Now, this can be a little bit complicated because you have to very much trust what you're seeing. Because a lot of times, like when I just started this, I was like, that's not, I'm just making stuff up in my head. but once I started just saying, okay, I'm just going to say it and see what happens, people were gleaning a lot from that. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing with you. Like, well, of course that's what that is. Because, you know, like for instance, like, you always had a fear of the ocean. You don't know why. You've always been petrified to go in the water. Well, in this past life, you drowned on the Titanic. That could be the reason why you're afraid of drowning and being in the ocean, because the last lifetime you had, you drowned. And it was terrible. So there's a lot that makes sense with those past life cards that you can glean from, and it makes a lot of sense for your present day situation, because a lot of those past life stuff are echoes into what is going on with you today. Okay? I do. And I will be using them today. She's like, yay! I also have, so another tarot card deck that's really fun to use are the Akashic Record. Are you guys familiar with the Akashic Record? Yes. This one, she's got it now. She's like, so the Akashic Record is basically a gigantic library of everything that ever was, everything that is today, and everything that ever will be. And that is managed by Archangel Metatron, and it has all the things in it. So the cards are a way to access that library to see what your Akashic Record presently says. You can access the Akashic Record for past lives as well. And these are really good also for past life readings also. I generally use the other deck. But either way, it's a thing, and you can use it. Like I said, tarot cards are very multifaceted. You can use them for pretty much anything. If you, like, let's say you have, like, an affinity for, like, French culture, you can find a tarot card deck that has, you know, French culture all over it, and it's very meaningful. Either way, you can find a tarot card deck that is really meaningful for you, that you connect with. And that's the other thing, is you want to really connect with the deck that you're trying to get, okay? So you can, like, okay, let me give you another example. I got a whole bunch of tarot card decks for Christmas, and I was super excited. I got this really pretty deck that was like an elemental alchemy deck, super beautiful. Started playing with it, and I was just kind of like, I mean, the communication was fine. I was getting communication from it, but it wasn't like anything that was really just, it just didn't feel, it's sort of like when you go out and hang out with a friend that you're just sort of like, they're okay. I mean, it's not like I'm going to spend every Saturday with them. You know, you're not thinking about calling them or whatever all the time. It's just one of those things you just don't have that really strong connection to, right? And that was with me with those cards. So anyway, I had a friend who absolutely loves getting tarot card readings for me. And I had this deck, and for some reason in the back of my mind, I was like, he needs that deck. And I don't know why, it just kind of came to my head. And so, like, I brought the deck in with me because I don't let anybody touch my cards. That's me. You have your own thing whenever you start divination practice. It's your own thing. If you let people touch your cards, fabulous. That's your thing. My thing, I don't let people touch my cards. That's just me. That's how I do. You do you, how you do it. Okay? But anyway, so I bring this deck in to him, and I was like, hey, I want you to open this up, and I want you to play with it. And he's like, you want me to touch your cards? And I'm like, well, just go with it here. Just open it up and play with them and let me know what you think. And so I come back about an hour later, and he was like, dude, I had this one card that kept popping out at me, and it was amazing, and I read about it, and it was freaking cool, and it made sense, and I'm just like, okay, those are your cards. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, queen, those are your cards. Like, take they're yours, not mine, you know? So that, you know, you have to connect with the deck that you have. It can't just be like, you know, that acquaintance that you don't really get along with, but you're trying to get this really deep communication that's really meaningful so you can build in your spiritual self. You want to have something that you're like, I trust you. You know, it's this very strong relationship that you have with this deck of cards. And it's a type of spiritual intimacy that's like, that you can't really describe, you know, because you're trusting these things to really give you what you need. And so you can't have just kind of like a half-assed relationship, you know what I mean, with your deck. It's the same thing with any divination tool. If you're not connected to it, don't use it. give it to somebody in your head. If you're like, well, she's gonna really love this rose quartz pendulum. I don't connect with it, but I know and I give it to her, and she's like, I've been looking for a rose quartz pendulum. How did you know? I don't know. It just happened. So anyway, make sure that when you're picking something out, you're being led to it. What I usually do with my decks is, like with these ones, I looked at it for weeks. I kept looking online, I kept looking at it, like flirting with it. This is so weird, like with, it's cards. But at the same time, huh?
Send it a poke.
Yes. Send it a couple likes, give it a few DMs, no big deal. See me. Yeah. But that's what you need to do. If you're finding yourself keeping on coming back to the same deck, acknowledge that this is you probably need that. And to take the next step and purchase and start playing with them, you're going to start to realize that the communication is very, very strong. And it's very meaningful to you. Don't be surprised if you get a little bit weepy when you start using your cards or your pendulum or your runes, and you're just like, how did I know? Dude, it's for real. Let me tell you. But it's very helpful. And once you start doing it, and once you start getting some really great information from it, it can be really life-changing for you. Do you guys have any questions for me about any? Yes, ma'am.
The Akashic records, you said the doorway or the whole thing is governed by the
Archangel Metatron.
Right?
The whole thing is governed by Metatron.
And nobody else is with him? Or no assistants? Or?
That's a great question. I imagine there's probably quite a few angels that are in that area, but like...
So that's the way to get through to it, is through him?
I always call on Metatron when it comes to anything regarding past lives or the Akashic record. Or even Archangel Uriel is the Archangel of Wisdom.
Yes.
And so I like to call upon, plus Archangel energy is so wonderful.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it is literally like, if you just need, like, okay, Michael for protection. If y'all are feeling like you're unsafe, or if you're clearing yourself or your space, Archangel Michael.
For energetic cord cutting, he does that too.
Ooh, girl.
Yeah, he does.
Yes, you should get up here yes. So yes, the Archangel Michael he is the guy that you want at your side when you're dealing with negative energy or somebody else's energy. Okay, whether it's on you or somebody else, or you're in a space that there's negativity, you want Archangel Michael to come and help you with that. And you get it immediately. Yeah. That's all they're there for, is to come and help you. That is their existence, is to be of assistance. So if you call upon them, they will be there, and it is always loving, light, and wonderful. It's not negative. There's nothing bad about it. Okay. I really like Mother Mary as well. She is very, very comforting, or Kuan Yin. Forgiveness and compassion, especially if you need it for yourself. That can be something that's very powerful and moving for you as well. If you look at any sort of like bodhisattvas, saints, archangels, different things from different religions, you can use those things. Just read about it. Read about it. What do they stand for? How would they assist you in that moment in time? And that can be very helpful. But archangel energy, they will always be there to help you. So if you need it, ask it. They always come, no matter what.
And the answers come, you say you get it through tarot when you access the Akashic records?
So yes, I use cards because that's my divination tool, and when I do any sort of Akashic record reading, I utilize my cards. But you can get information just by asking, and you can hear or see or know. That's, clairsentience, clairvoyance, claircognizance. Clairsentience is feeling. So, you can get information just from yourself by asking. It just takes some work and some time. Just like when you exercise to build muscle, it's the same sort of thing. You have to do it in order to practice it and get very clear communication. Okay? Right. Yes.
How did you come to choose to use tarot cards?
Oh, that's a good question. So long time ago, I saw my older sister use them, and I was curious about it, and so I got my own deck years later, and I was getting great information from it, but I was just sort of like a sparing thing. And, you know, I went with what my sister told me. She was like, you go and you find the deck that's calling to you and you get that deck. And so I did that. I went to like a Barnes & Noble and found a deck, and I was like, okay, that's the one I want. So I got it. And I used it, and I got great communication from it. And then, oh, here's another thing that might be really interesting for you guys to know too as well. So when you pick a deck, you use it, you get great communication, it's wonderful. You see another deck that you absolutely love, and you get it, and you start using that, and you start getting even better information from it, and you find you're not using that other deck nearly as much anymore. That's okay. It just means that deck served its purpose, and that's exactly what I did with my first deck. Is I brought it. I think I said this at the last class. I think you were there. Yeah. She's like, "Oh, you're repeating yourself, Lorelei." So you take that deck, and you can give it to somebody else, which is very, very meaningful, and they can glean a lot of communication from that gift. Okay, so I had gone to a class, and for some reason I brought that old deck with me, and I was like, I don't know, for some reason something's telling me to bring the deck with me. So I brought it with me, and then she was talking about how she's trying to get into tarot cards, and she really wants to go get a deck, and I'm like, there you go, there's a deck. And she's like, oh my God, how did you know, la la la. I didn't, some tell me I should have brought my deck with me today, so, and that's how you do it, right? So to answer your question, I watched somebody else, and then I started doing it, and it was just very, very meaningful to me. And then I kind of like took like some time off, and then re-picked it up when I had a coworker say, I'm looking for somebody that can do a tarot read, and I'm like, I can do that for you. And she's like, really? And so that's when things really started picking up for me. I started doing it on myself all the time, and then I started doing it on my coworkers all the time, and then and then it just started branching out from there. So that's okay. All right, you guys. Do we have any more questions, comments? Okay, then that covers the divination class. So again, you can find divination tools in many different things. These are just the ones that are pretty well known that you can use for right now. Okay? Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you so much.